You can add as many features as you want and you can get positive feedback on those features. But if you don't really understand what's driving their core satisfaction, if we aren't making money for that owner, then they're not going to be happy. I have a decent set of golf clubs, but if I can go buy a more expensive golf club and my golf game doesn't improve that much, but I have to spend a lot of money to do it, is better good enough to buy?
Welcome to Revenue Rearview, the show where founders, CEOs, and revenue leaders look back at the moments that changed everything. The breakthroughs, the blind spots, the turning points, and the lessons that can help you move forward faster. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Revenue Rearview. Today's guest has spent 20 years building things people said couldn't be built. She helped grow HomeAway and VRBO into the giants of vacation rentals back when renting a stranger's house still sounded crazy. Then she became chief product officer at RVshare and turned it into the biggest RV rental marketplace on the planet. Her whole career is one move on repeat. Take something invisible and make people trust it. And now she's doing it with the highest stakes yet, a wearable that spots dangerous heat strain and young athletes before anyone can feel it coming. She's the founder and CEO of HeatSense. Please join me in welcoming Melissa Fortenberry. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. You worked for all these big companies, had major success, and then you decided, hey, time for me to start my own company. So tell us kind of the mentality behind that. And then we want to hear about how you've grown these other companies into the conglomerates that you have. So start by telling us about HeatSense.
Sure. So I guess that to make the leap from being an employee to a founder, I'm sure many of your listeners are that as well. But I think it takes, for me at least, it took years of experience to have confidence in the fact that I knew enough to be able to do it. I think that younger entrepreneurs who don't have that business experience are super, super brave. So I don't call myself as brave as them. But I think I was just at a point in my career where I had led enough, experienced enough, and gone through enough companies and life cycles of growth that I felt comfortable doing it. I guess in that I'm a risk taker. And so taking risks is fun for me and growth is fun for me. And so you get all of those when you start a company. So that's probably the background on what gave me the guts to do it. I started HeatSense about a year ago. You know, my background's in technology and I live in Texas and it's super hot. I have 3 kids who play outdoor sports and I went to my son's football game. And I think as parents on the sidelines in Texas, we always say, hey, like, it feels like it's a little too hot. Maybe we shouldn't be playing right now. And then the conversation kind of ends there. But on this August day, 2 years ago, I got sick from the heat in the stands and it was, I couldn't breathe. I was dizzy. I was nauseous and I really couldn't recover it was a football game. And it was the first time that my worry turned to fear for what was happening with the athletes on the field. So I went home and I did a deep dive and tried to understand everything I could about heat, and everything I learned I wasn't happy with. And so, I kind of couldn't go back from that. And I thought the status quo had to change. So that's when the idea of HeatSense was born.
Awesome. Yeah. And I don't know anyone else who's doing it. It usually comes from someone seeing a need, right? So it totally makes sense. Okay. So with that, are you using the same playbook that you used for the other companies that you've grown, or is it completely different?
That's a good question. I think there's different playbooks for where you are in terms of growth or life cycle of a company. Whenever you're doing something brand new, I think there's always going to be the commonality. I always say is like, you have to be solving a problem. Go and define the simple problem you are going to solve and make sure there's pain right there. And there's enough people with enough pain to solve it. And so if you're not solving a problem where there's pain, to me, that's kind of the first big milestone you have to cross. So really validating that pain is a big step to me. I think another one, which is, I think, constantly evolving for whatever stage a company is in, is who your customer is and what their needs are. So I think that's all, truly and deeply understanding who your prospect and customer is and what segment to go after. I've worked at companies where we have multiple segments, right? And multiple kinds of targets, but you're always going to be spending to me, a lot of time trying to understand who that user is. Because if you're not solving a problem, there's no company in my mind.
Yeah, completely. That's kind of like the baseline of everything.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, before we hit record, we were talking about VRBO.
Mm-hmm.
And you were there from very early on up until IPO. I don't know how long after that, but did they already know at that point? By the time you came on, did they already know who their ideal client was? Did they understand did the problem change that they were trying to solve? Talk to us about,
No,
because that's exciting. It's fun. Everyone knows what VRBO is now.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it's more of, we were defining a category, which is kind of what I'm also doing with HeatSense. And when you're defining a category that doesn't exist, to me, the main thing you do is lead with education. And so we spent years and years and years educating our customers, even identifying the problems they had and empowering them to know they could do something about it. I think if you can help identify the problem someone has and then give them control with your solution, that's super powerful. And so we knew we were defining a category. I joined before even the idea of Airbnb existed. It was the next thing that came along in terms of vacation rentals. And we spent a lot of time even convincing vacation rental owners that, how to even think about what it meant to rent their house. So some people were like, yeah, my second home can be a money maker. I need to disconnect emotionally from it. Cause people buy these second homes for, generations to get together and very important family events. Right. And so when you rent it out, you kind of have to disconnect from that a little bit. So even teaching people about how to think about how to approach what we could help them do was part of what we did a lot.
So it's interesting because I read a book called Play Bigger, and I believe he's going to be one of the authors is coming on, but he talks about exactly what you are saying of category, defining a category, creating a category, and then becoming the leader in it, which VRBO still is the leader. Educating the public isn't cheap and it isn't easy. Did you have a ton of funding that helped you do that? How did you go about doing this?
There was quite a bit of funding, but I think it's kind of interesting. It parallels with my company now, is that we were a B2B as well as a B2C company, B2B to C almost. And so there were individual homeowners across the world who had second homes who could rent out their home. But the old school way to rent a home was through a property manager, and those still exist today. And so those were the very important relationships we created in the beginning. And that was actually, we had to turn them, we had to get them to trust us and say, we're here to help you make money. But they had the inventory in the early days of those owners that could help us get that word out. Yeah. So we were able to find groups of people, not just the end consumer. And so in that way, it was, there was a way to get the message out to larger groups without having to go find the individual consumer. So at HeatSense, I'm kind of doing the same. I think ultimately, I haven't talked a lot about it, but ultimately, I think there is an individual consumer, but because they don't know anything about that there's a solution to solve for heat, I'm going, and my first customers are bigger groups of teams. They're teams. So they're groups of people that can go help me educate everybody else, basically.
So the number one thing I'm taking away from what you just talked about is when you're growing a company, if you can find the partnership, the channel partnership, the groups, like you mentioned, that already have the client there. Yeah. Start there. Right. Instead of going after an individual or just a one-off. look for those that have already
Right.
your audience. And then, so I'm guessing you must have had some type of, because you still have to get them to trust you. So
Right.
these,
Sure.
right? You have to get them to trust you. This is a whole new concept.
Mhm.
And I'm guessing when you're going to these rental companies, I have a friend who runs Tahoe luxury properties,
Yeah.
right? And they've only been dealing with very high level properties, but now I'm pretty confident they've partnered with VRBO and Airbnb, but they're protective
Yeah.
of their
Oh,
brand, right? They have a reputation that they're living up to. So what was the hardest part of breaking into these type of relationships and getting them to believe that you can even do it without screwing up
yeah.
their
I mean,
reputation?
I I think about this all the time. I think everybody always wants the easy win. And I just think at the end of the day, it takes hard work, no matter what you're doing. And so in that instance, for like in the property manager, it was, years of quarterly meetings, monthly meetings of bringing property managers into, the umbrella and helping them build the products with us, bring them in, create trusted advisors with the people that you want to be part of your future. And I think through that, at the end of the day, there's people behind jobs. And when you can have personal relationships, you create trust, right? And so I think those are always going to be critical.
Okay, so there's been so many nuggets already that you've dropped, Melissa. Okay, so partnerships, but also bring in some of the key people as trusted advisors to help you build it out,
Sure. Yeah.
right? Okay, anything else? Anything else that we should be aware of that really helps with
I was,
creating a
you,
category?
you kind of asked about marketing a minute ago, and I was thinking about that. And when you're creating a category, and I'm experiencing this now, you want somebody to go and search the internet or AI and for you to be able to buy keywords and for your company to show up as a way to, as related to those keywords. And when you're creating a category, those don't exist. And so, it's not as relevant in the AI world, or it's like rapidly changing, I would say. But SEO, I think in the early days is always going to be an important part. So creating content and establishing yourself as that category leader and somebody who can provide education, whether that's content on your website, it's newsletters, it's a blog, those kinds of things, guides, all of those things I think are super helpful as well. They kind of help anchor you as a leader from the beginning, you know?
Yeah, so you got to establish that. But with the SEO, there is an SEO that directly says rent your house out.
Right.
Yeah, or whatever it is. If it's a new category, you're establishing it, just like
Right.
ride sharing, right? So what did you do for that, for the SEO? Did you piggyback on something else at first until you had more recognition?
Well, I mean, I think it's all about staying in the area you are. Like, for example, right now I'm trying to solve heat. So heat, people, rising heat strain in people. So I'm educating people about, everything they need to know about the heat. If you own for HomeAway, VRBO, Airbnb, it's all, well, not Airbnb, but for HomeAway and VRBO, it was people owning second homes. So if you were to own a second home, there are a group of problems you have no matter what. And so go and find those problems and help them solve the problems they might have. How do you pay your taxes? How do how do you keep it maintained when you don't live close by? There's, no matter what, there's going to be problems you can find that will help you connect with those people.
So I come from the sales background and we talk about gap selling, and that's exactly what you're doing is you're finding what's the problem, how does your product solve it? But then you're doing it from a frame of, so that's the gap,
Yeah.
but then you're doing it from the standpoint of education,
Right. Yeah.
right? So it's more people want to learn and they're
Yes.
looking it up. And so that's how you build the traction is what I'm getting from you,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
just be everywhere or
Yes.
as many places as possible.
Right.
And then, so you did the same type of approach with RVshare, I'm guessing.
Yes and no. So interestingly enough, so Airbnb and HomeAway / VRBO, they kind of created the runway for companies like RVshare. that came after. The idea of renting out something that's an asset to you, we didn't have to reteach that. People already knew that that was a possibility. So I think the only hurdle there was working through what it meant to rent out an RV instead of a home. And I think that is, breaking down the process, understanding problems, find what problems do an RV owner have unrelated to renting out their RV. So for example, most RV owners only use their RV 2 weeks a year. So goldmine, like you're sitting there paying a note on something you don't use, right? So find what exists in their problem set today that you can help solve.
So you're telling us all the things that worked to help grow these companies, but nothing is ever a linear line. So what were the things that you found that you thought, oh, this is going to be exactly what we need, or that you were betting on certain things and it didn't work out? Looking in the rear view, what were the things that didn't work?
So what drove the satisfaction at the homeowners at the end of the day was how much money they made. That's all it was, is they were trying to make money. And if you could literally plot their satisfaction based on how much money they made from our website. And so you can, I guess where I was going with that, was that you can add as many features as you want and you can get positive feedback on those features. But if you don't really understand what's driving their core satisfaction, you're not, we could have built 1,000 features. And if we aren't making money for that owner, then they're not going to be happy. So I don't know if that directly answers it, but I think finding the core driver of satisfaction is critical.
Well, I think, I have a tech company and I have a CTO, actually an engineering team, and they're constantly building. They're constantly, like, if I say one thing to them, like just an idea that I heard from a client, all of a sudden the next day they come back and look, Midori, what we just built, right? So it's easy to get off track.
For sure.
If you don't have the right focus. So I think with what you're talking about, Melissa, is what do they really care about?
Yes.
Pay attention to that metric. Yes, you can still build some other things, but always come back to what is the number one thing and how do you continue improving their revenue, right? And if you can do that.
A great example of that is also when companies grow and they try and expand into new verticals. So for example, the Airbnb and the VRBO, where they add activities or they add the ability to sell your vacation home, a real estate vertical. And so those, to me, kind of to piggyback on what you're saying, are distractions in my mind. And so if you're not spending time on what drives the core satisfaction of your core customer, then it's a distraction.
So for you to figure out that was the number one thing, because I could think of other things that would bother them, like, people are stealing from me, or they broke things, or they don't respect my house, right? So there's a lot of things that go through my head, but you guys figured out when it came to, you strip away everything else, the number one thing is they want to be making money. So how did you figure that out? Did you go interview your clients? Did you have a process in place?
All the time. Yeah.
All the time. Okay. So constant.
Yes. Constant. Yeah. The more you can talk with people, the better.
Yeah. Okay. So before we hit record, you were talking about how you were in New York, I believe, when tech was just starting to come around. And I think this is interesting and it fits with what we're talking about because we have to pay attention to, right now we're in the AI thing, right? Yeah. AI is still, it's been around for a while, but for many of us, it's brand new and it is absolutely disrupting businesses. Yeah. So let's talk about your experience when this was, when .com was just starting to become something.
Right. Yeah. So I moved to New York after college. I speak Spanish and wanted to be able to move abroad for my first job, but I figured out if you don't have any job experience, you can't really get a job outside the country. And so I figured New York was the next best thing. I went to work for a bank for about 6 months because my major was finance. And I figured out that stocks and bonds were not for me. But I found a company, an internet company. This was before Google even existed. Yahoo was the only browser, and it was called Star Media or Star Media. And it was the browser for Spanish and Portuguese speakers. And so I went to work there. And we did, the IPO and then kind of the bust. And so through that, I think I guess from a career perspective, I learned I love growth. It's super exciting and winning is super fun.
That's why you have 3 kids that are playing sports.
Yeah.
Totally, this all tracks.
The downside of that is not so fun. But I think one of the key, I think I learned 2 really important things. One was a career thing. And I think your audience is founders, but for those who may not be founders yet and you're building their careers, if you can build your career by finding the things that you're good at and that you like, and then moving to the next company using those things, you'll eventually end at a place where you're doing a job you love.
Great advice.
Yeah. So that was a super important learning for me. The other is that like if you're not making money, you don't have a company. And so I spent, this was now like early 2000s. I left New York, went and got a graduate degree. That's when I ended up in Austin, Texas. And my requirement for startups became like, I love growth. I love high growth, but there has to be a revenue path and has to be solid. And so, it kind of always goes back to those basics. Is there a business model that can make sense? Is good enough or better enough to buy? So actually, this was advice I got recently, which is there can be all these different products in the world, and you might have the example that was given to me is like, I have a decent set of golf clubs, but if I can go buy a more expensive golf club and my golf game doesn't improve that much, but I have to spend a lot of money to do it, is better good enough to buy? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so I think that that's super important in terms of like thinking about growing companies is when you're trying to add verticals, when you're growing into new segments, like it goes back to that. Can you generate the revenue? Is there enough of a problem to actually put money behind it and pay for something? And like just never stop asking yourself that.
Yeah. And so when I think of the .com bust of the early 2000s, right? I remember talking with friends who were in the industry, in the tech industry, and they were saying, yeah, we're getting tons of funding. Money was flowing like a river. But their product didn't work, and they knew their product didn't work.
Yeah.
But yet they still got all this funding, and then it would go under. But right. I think that comes back to knowing the basics, right? Yeah. We have to learn from our past. We have to learn from history. And so with this AI stuff going on, this is the new season that we're in, or with the
Make
company
sure
that we're
something you can monetize, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has to work.
Right. Yeah.
That too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So with your company that you have right now, what's the hardest part of growing it? What are you noticing? You've been in it for about a year, I think you said.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And and I don't know if you have a ton of funding behind you, but what is the number one challenge that you're noticing right now?
I don't think that this is just to kind of catch people up on. So I have a wearables solution that is a fitness tracker. I don't know if many people do video, but this is it. It's just a fitness tracker that measures rising heat strain. And we launched an app last fall for basically like the club parent. So, lacrosse, soccer, tennis, golf, if they're athletes on the sidelines or in a game or in a practice and they want to be able to see rising heat strain, they can download our app and track it. Just so you a little bit about heat. Once you have visible symptoms of heat, you are already sick. And so it's too late. And there are athletes that die every year from the heat. And it's only getting hotter. That's kind of the gist of it. It's called core body temperature. If you can track core body temperature, you can be proactive about managing the heat and basically stay in a performance zone and never get sick. So all of those things are good. So I built the app and it was really just an exercise of figuring out what problems I needed to solve. But I guess when you talk about mistakes, it was like a good mistake to make up front because I got to the product I needed to make, but it was the wrong customer in the beginning. Because the parent is actually what I would call more of a consumer and someone I would need to find online. And there are no keywords to buy yet,
Yeah.
Because I'm creating a category. And so we spent the fall building a Teams product, and we can now get an entire roster, like over 100 sensors on a field at the same time. And we have a dashboard where trainers and coaches can see basically rising heat strain and know when they need to proactively cool or know that they can keep pushing basically. And so what we've learned is that people are busy. And when you're creating a company, using your network and personal relationships to get people to trust that first meeting is important. So that has been a critical part of getting off the ground is, putting in, I'm not a natural salesperson, but I think when you start something as a founder, there's something in you that makes it's not even sales, it's just pure determination. And so that outreach that I would consider salesy as a founder is not, I don't feel like it's sales. It feels more like, hey, I have I'm doing this. Can you help me introduce to, this person? And then there's a forward to an introduction. Great. That's better than nothing,
Yes, 100%. Are you thinking of doing partnerships with what you have with, like with Fitbit or anything else like that?
No, we aren't yet. It's a completely different technology. The data could eventually end up in some of the same software, I think, but it's totally different sensors. We've found our key target, and who we're going after now is college football programs. I think it goes back to just do the work. And so we've been on the road all summer. We visited maybe 10 D1, I think a little over 10 D1 football programs. And we're bringing our product on the field and showing trainers and, the performance teams what it looks like to proactively manage the heat. And we're having the conversation. And so by bringing sensors to a team practice, we get to have that educational conversation. We get to build the trust. And at the end of the day, we give them the data from that session. So they get the education and they get the data for free. And it's been great because it's you learn, I don't know how many industries are still like this, but college football and that network of trainers, it's a small group of people. And so, just building those relationships one by one is what we're doing.
Yep. And then they talk.
Yeah.
Right. So it's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's boots on the ground. You
Yes.
got to be willing to go out there and do whatever it is to break through. So I love that. It's brilliant. Okay. So now, Melissa, we are going to jump into our lightning round.
Okay.
And so what this is, it's fun. It's just quick questions and quick answers. You don't need to overthink it, but you ready?
Okay, sure.
Okay, perfect. So first question, best revenue advice you ever got in one sentence?
Pricing is easy to change.
Okay, we got to go into that for a second. So pricing is easy to change. So are you saying you have noticed that it's better to start at a certain, how do you come up with the pricing? This is a question I get a lot.
Well, you have to start with cost and margin and all those things. Unit economics is huge. So number one, understand your unit economics. Anything can be built from there. But if you are delivering value, then you can change your price.
Yep. Love it. Okay. Next one. I have to remember it's lightning round too, because I want to go into all kinds of stuff. So yeah. So, okay. Most overrated growth tactic that you have seen.
Gosh. I have to say, I don't know if this is positive or negative, but the commitment that people have had to have for the past 20 years to Google keywords is, it's ends up being a race of competitor against competitor, and everyone loses and Google wins. And so, I think it really delivers value, and that's where a lot of revenue comes from for a lot of companies. But there's a little bit of a negative angle for me because of that, because companies work so hard to become profitable and so much money goes to Google, and you're just giving it to Google where you're competing against your competitor,
Totally. So, and they can see everything you're doing. They can see everything you're doing. So, I'm with you. I started with Google AdWords, how we grew our first business. 25 cents a click. I could go in and change one word and our phone would start ringing. Those were the good old days. Right?
Yeah.
Things have changed since then. Okay. Number 3, hire the experienced operator or the hungry, unproven one.
I don't know how to answer that. I think it depends on the person and the business and the stage. If they're the proven operator, to me, there would have to be a lot of, I would need to see that they are still hungry.
I agree. I completely agree with you. I think that's a complicated question and complicated answer. The experienced operator, what I would say to that is they can be incredibly valuable, but you probably have to change the role a bit for them so they can still have their own autonomy to thrive within that, because that's how they operate. That's what I think of that. And then the hungry, unproven one.
You just need a good team around them.
Yeah.
Right. And to know what you want from that hunger specifically.
Yep. And then kind of hone that and know it's more of a longer game than a shorter game. So that's our together answer of that question.
Right.
Okay.
For example, if they don't have experience in marketing, but that's a really important lever for growth, like make sure there's a strong marketing lead in there,
Yeah, that they can learn from.
If they're a product person, make sure there's a really strong marketing lead just make sure it's balanced in what you get from all of that.
Good advice. Okay. The deal, the launch, or bet you're proudest of?
Well, I have to say launching my own company.
I was wondering how you were going to answer that because you've had some pretty exciting things.
Yeah, I have to say launching my own company, 25 years in the making when it comes down to the experience I'm putting towards this and taking the risk. And so we have paying customers. And if you go back to how we started, we're solving a problem and people are willing to pay for it. And so I'm super excited about it.
I agree. And when you launch a company, you get that first paying client.
Yeah.
It's like, there's really nothing better. It just feels so darn good. So I love that. Okay. Last question. So finish this statement. Revenue is easy once you stop blank.
Revenue is easy once you stop being too busy to not listen to your customers.
Thank you. Yes. Right? I think just busy, just too busy. Yeah. So many
meetings. Too many, companies get big. There's too many meetings. There's too much overhead. There's too much to make decisions. And that's when revenue gets harder, I think.
And it goes back to what you said earlier. Know your customer, know what's really important to them. And if you are focused on that, you'll be okay.
Right.
Yeah. I love it. Melissa, where can we find out more about you? What's your journey as you're growing this company? And even for those who are interested in your product, where do we send them?
Yes. So our website is HeatSense.com. You can subscribe or get a membership to our app and get a sensor there. I'm also on LinkedIn at Melissa Fortenberry, and my email is melissa@heatsense.com. I'd love to talk to any of your listeners. So
I love it. All right.
I think that the founding community, the community of founders is amazing. I think that one thing I've learned from being a founder is how helpful people are willing to be. And I think that's incredible. So I love that you speak to.
Yes, I get to talk to people like you and learn. And it's every time. I don't think I've ever had an interview with someone where I don't walk away with tons of nuggets in my pocket. So
awesome.
I strongly recommend it. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing so many gold nuggets. And I look forward to watching the journey with HeatSense and all the
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on Revenue Rearview. If today's conversation gave you a fresh perspective, subscribe, share it with another leader, and we'll see you next time. Because the best decisions are often clearer in the rear view.